This is part 2 of the shiur that I gave yesterday, and I would like to introduce the concept that the Mamzer, the Mamzer, as we're not allowed to live with the Mamzer, is maybe only derabonnon, and this is what I would like to speak today about. There is, in general, a lot of times that the Torah asks us to do certain things, and then the question is, what happens if we've done it? So, of course, there is a punishment, but what happens with the things that we've done? Are we allowed to eat it or not? Are we allowed to have profit from it or not? But the fruits that came out from what we've done, are we allowed to have it, to take profit from it, etc.? And most of the time, it is always a knas. The chazal have put a knas because the Torah does not many times speak about it. There are certain elements like also velo. If you assume that the issur of bishul, the issur of besam cholov is in the bishul, then the issur of achila is a result of that issur. Or you could have said also the opposite, that besam cholov, the Torah does not want you to eat, and therefore he already says that you should not cook it neither. So it's kind of an azora as to avoid you from eating it. You're not allowed to even cook it. Similarly, we have said that the Torah does not want you to eat the chometz, and then the Torah says that you're not even allowed to have it in order to avoid you from by accident to go and eat. But on the other hand, you have Maaseh Shabbos. If somebody cooks something on Shabbos, he is allowed to in Torah to eat it, but with derabonnon not allowed to eat it. And so the question is, what happens with other isurim? And so you have a particular law that is in Parshas Re'eh, which is lo'sechal kol to'evu. Lo'sechal kol to'evu is, if you look in Chazal, it's a bit spread out, but specifically I think in Chulin, there is an element of the azora, that it is an azora for everything that you know are not allowed to do, that you're not allowed to eat. Specifically, the law, as Chinuch explains the Rambam, that it goes on that when you have a kodshim and you want to eat a kodshim, so what do? You're not a kohen or whatever, you want to still eat it, and what you do is you put a mum, you make a mum in it, you pastel the korban, and once the moment you pastel the korban, the kedusha goes away, and you can be poider it, and therefore you can eat it. And so the Torah says somebody that does it on purpose, somebody that makes an issur, here boy mum is a loisasen, you're not allowed to put make a begam, like noisar, you're not allowed to make it to think of noisar, or that's bigul, but you're not allowed to do noisa. And the azor we learned from that you're not allowed to eat it afterwards. We learned from specifically the cases normally is about the behemoth that only a coin is allowed to eat. And so what the balbas can do is he can do a little more on the behemoth. Then the kedusha of the korban falls away, it becomes chulin, and then normally you can eat it from a perspective of eating. There is no issur of eating it. And so therefore, the Torah says that you're not allowed to eat. What I said not to do, I don't want you to eat. So that kind of a generic issur that you're not allowed to benefit from an issur. They speak a lot about it. How far does it go? Why taker? Maybe Maaseh Shabbos should also be included in the Sechakot To'evu. So there is a lot of shmooze about that. It's a difficult one, but this is how Chazal have learned. Now, you see sometimes that Chazal wanted to do a takon, and then what they do is either it remains as takanot derabonnon, sometimes they associate a posuk to it. They find a posuk in the Torah, and this is only an asmachta, but it's a derabonnon that has an asmachta. And sometimes they even learn it in a posuk, and it becomes a deorayta. The Pri Megadim says that it is possible that the derabonnon sometimes they associate it to a posuk and they make it a deorayta. But it started off with derabonnon and it becomes a deorayta. And it's not from a diuk that they're doing, but they actually, as we shall see, they're creating a new issur. And how do they do that? They do that by, and this is my own chiddush, they do it by changing the words. So there is a posuk, for example, it says in the posuk, lois is goidedu. It has to do with not to scratch or to make a scratch on your skin for that person. This is lois is goide. It happens schite. Schite is also the same issur. One is with the kli, the other one is without the kli. And then Chazal say that Chazal wanted to ask a person, a community to split up, to create two communities. And so it says, so it's going to do lesasun agudes agudes. So it sounds, or it's going to do also lesasun agudes agudes. So they changed the word, they split it up. and they change the way that you have to pronounce it. They even add some more letters. And so basically it becomes kind of a deorayta, although it is clearly a derabonnon, but it becomes a deorayta. They even ask questions, why is it not a lav shebechlulo? So it becomes a deorayta, and so that we are reading it differently, and therefore it is still a derabonnon that has a din of a deorayta. That's my personal opinion. A lot of people will say, how can you say that? Of course, it was Sinai. This is that's why I have to read it. But this is a chiddush I want to say, and I will continue in that mahalach. There are two lavim in this week's parsha that are similar, also in the terms of a knas. That if you've done something, then you will not be allowed to take benefit from it. One of them is in the law that the person is not allowed to. There's a person that's not allowed to plant kilayim in a keren. He's not allowed to. Let's assume that we are talking here about chitim and so'erev into a keren, and this is the taaseh. Pen tikdash hameleo is normally the punishment. That if you do it, then it will become also bano. And how does it become also bano? Pen tukat eish. So Chazal again here take it and they split up the word tikdash and they say tukat eish. They add even an aleph in the middle. So basically they change the wordings and therefore they are adding on a new issue, which is the issue of Isuran. Now the question is, how should I read it normally? So there is a pshat and then there is a drush, but the drush in such a way that it becomes part of the Torah Sheb'Saf. And the second case, as we shall see, is leyovo Mamzer b'kal Hashem. And they also, Chazal say, Mamzer is somebody that is born from illicit marriage, and therefore not all of them. Is the tanuim. Abba Kivi goes very extreme. On one hand, we pass like the very extreme. On the other hand, that reduces the number of mamzerim. It's only the ones that have a few covers, etc. But they how do they learn it in the postuk? Mamzer is mumzar. Again, they split up. They add a letter, the vov, and they say Mamzer is from the mumzar. The reason why I'm saying that is because indeed there is a pshat. There is a pshat in the postuk, and then like Lois is going to do. There is a pshat, and then Chazal are adding letters and are splitting them up, and they'll create a new kind of a loisatze, but it has all the dinim of a deorayta. For example, what is pentikdash hamle? What is the pshat? Maybe it's a pshat. Pentikdash hamle, pentukatesh. It's another way of saying it. It becomes a kedusha. Kedusha can also mean an isu, and so no. There is that when you look in, first of all, when you look in the first posuk, the posuk that precedes it, it says kisimna by skodev siso mak legagecho v'losasim dum bebeser keipol anuv lumen. So in the same parsha, because there's a samach and before that posuk, and there's a samach after the lesisra karpo kilayim pentikdash. So there's two samachs in between them, before and after them. In other words, these are actually how do you call them? The same. They are in the same parsha. And so they should convey the same kind of message. So the first one is clearly Eitz Tova. The Boinshon, when you read the posuk, is the Boinshon tells you do a marker. Why? Because if you're not going to do a marker, then there will be blood on your house. People will fall. So it's Eitz Tova Kamashmalo. So what about the next posuk? So it seems that this was also kind of an Eitz Tova Kamashmalo. Why is it Eitz Tova Kamashmalo? So Menachem is one of the we already discussed once a long time ago the machlokes between Menachem and Dunash, or maybe more Dunash against Menachem. Rashi brings him down a lot. He wrote a Machberes, and he wrote actually an encyclopedia of the words, of the Hebrew words. In his time, they still believed that the words, the shroshim of the words can be one letter, two letters. Today, we know that the shroshim are three letters in the Hebrew. And but in any case, normally he writes only the pshat in the sense of the words, and he gives a pirush on this parsha, on this posuk. So it's the first time. I don't think that in the whole Machberes that he does that. I don't know if it's the only time, but it's very unique in the sense that he elaborates a whole page. If you have this in Hebrew books, I think there is nearly a whole page that he prints out and explains this posuk of this week's parsha. What does it mean? And they explain something very nice, and Ibn Ezra actually refers to it. Ibn Ezra knows it, and he says that we should look in the Machperes of Menachem of this posuk. So he explains like that if we all know that there are in the different agricultural times, the soirim, the barley, they become ripe first, and then is the chitim 1 month later, and then is a month or two later, 1 month also is, or a few weeks afterwards is the grapes, and then is the zaysim, the olives, is in the more already afterwards, closer to Hanukkah, when the things are completely ripe. And so there are different times. So if you will plant soir and barley with chitim, with wheat, together with a kerem in a vineyard, what will happen is, as those who have been to vineyards, how does a grapes grow? He actually has fingers, he has these little tentacles that are trying to find something that they can grip on. You will see it's got little things that are turning around, that have this force to turn around, and once they grip something, they are turning around to hold themselves tightly, and then between them on this branch there is a grape that can grow because it has the force to withhold, because a grape is very heavy, and therefore it has to grab itself to something. And so what will happen if you plant wheat and barley? The grapes will find themselves and will attach themselves to the wheat and to the barley, and at some point you will not be able to cut the wheat and the barley, and you will have to let it go. You will have to let it stand there until the grapes are ready, and the wheat and the barley will not be able. At some point you have to cut. And if you're waiting too long, the wheat and the barley are becoming dry and they lose their flexibility. And with a little bit of wind, they will crack and they will collapse. And everything will collapse with them. The whole vineyard, the whole grape will also collapse with it. And everything will become mixed. And the problem is, says Menachem, that in this wheat and in this barley and in this grapes, there is bikurim. Bikurim is kedusha, is kodshin, is a part of a korban. Bikurim is the firstborn, the first what comes out, has to be actually put aside, have to be normally, Chazal say, to put a bag around it, make a simmer, and because this has become a kedusha, and this kedusha has to be brought to the Beis Hamikdash. So according to Menachem, that according to the text, Bikurim becomes from itself kedusha. Even if the Baal Bayis is not pointing out this should be Bikurim, there is a Bikurim in there, and it automatically becomes Bikurim, like a B'chor Behemah, although that Chazal are teaching us that we should say Areze Kodesh, but it becomes from itself Bikurim, according to Menachem. And so therefore, when it will collapse, there will be Bikurim mixed with other things, and this will, and since you won't be able to differentiate them, they will all become kedusha. They will all become kodshin. It's going to be one big mix of kodshin, and then you lose. It's for the Beis Hamikdash, it's not a problem. You have to bring everything to the Beis Hamikdash, but for the person, it becomes a problem because the idea is not to have to bring to the Beis Hamikdash, only to bring bikurim. The rest to have for your family, and here you cannot eat it, and you have to give it to the kohen, etc., etc. And so it's Tevik Mashpalon. Don't do that, because if you plant chitim and soirim next to a geffen, you will see that the geffen will attach himself to this chitim and soirim. You won't be able to cut it, and it will be a kind of a economic catastrophe. And so pen tigdash hameleo, lest this is a lois sizrakam chokelayim. You should not plant it. Why? Pen lest tigdash hameleo, the meleo, which is the bikurim. Meleo means what becomes ripe, what is pulled, the ones that come out first. It's a melioscho v'dimacho lois ache. It's also melioscho means Chazal teaches bikurim. The bikurim will be magdish, kind of, the zera asher tizro, the chitim and the soirim, and utuas hakorem, and also the kerem. So the meleo, the bikurim, will be magdish because it's going to be mixed up, it's going to fall down, and it will all become kosher. So this is how Menachem is explaining it. Now, by the way, Menachem was attacked by Dunash for being eventually karoi or has karoic thinking, and therefore he was attacked. And you can look it up in I think on Wikipedia, the story between Dunash and Menachem. Yeah, his Talmidim of Dunash apparently hit him physically, Menachem, from out of Kanos, and apparently he died not so long after. So the idea is maybe that he died from his from his ailments, from the wounds that he has been suffering from this hitting, this bashing up. And he wrote a letter about that, a letter explaining himself and then crying about the situation. And then at the end, Dunash wrote a very harsh letter against Menachem at the time. He wrote a song about that and who attacks. We know Dunash actually because the Devai Hoser, Vegan Choroin, is also the letters Dunash. And also the deorayta is also, if you look at the first letters, they are making Dunash. So we know Dunash in our singing, in our songs. They were songwriters, but they were very big in the Hebrew Dikduk. And similarly, then afterwards, the Rabbeinu Tam, because Rashi brings down Menachem and Dunash. So Rashi, I think there is even a Rashi where it brings down both Menachem and Dunash. But Rabbeinu Tam afterwards wrote a whole song to defend Menachem against Dunash. So all the times that Dunash had against Menachem, Rabbeinu Tam answers them, and you can find it on Hebrew book. It's an interesting subject. Now, so this is the pshat. So what does Chazal do? They want to find the issue from having benefit from it, and so they use that posuk, and they say pen tikdash is pen tukat eish, lest you will have to burn it. So they give it a chiyuv to burn, and it becomes a derayta mamish. And use mamish is pen tukat eish. If somebody takes benefit from the kilayim, he should have malchus. If not, because there is no malchus on anor, but if he does other things that has as kind of a meiser maybe, then I don't know. I don't remember anymore. We have to check it in the Minchas Chinuch if there is malchus. But it's mamish a lav that Chazal have added. Similarly, it's also by Mamzer. Mamzer bekal Hashem. What is the pshat of Mamzer? And this is a discussion by the Pashtonim, because the word Mamzer is only referring here once in Pashas Setze and another in Zechariah. Zechariah says, Vayeshev Mamzer l'Ashdod. So the Mamzer will go back to Ashdod, or will live in Ashdod. And so it's difficult to understand what is the word Mamzer. And so you do see there in Zechariah, especially in Rashi maybe, and even Ibn Ezra here as well by us, in Pashas Setze, that it could also mean a nation, an ethnic group. There was an ethnic group called Mamzer. We don't know why, but the Rebbeinu said that you should not marry them, you should not let them have, as we said before, not have important positions in the nation. But that the Mamzer is an ethnic group, and it makes sense because it's in the next posuk, we speak about Mamzer, about Ammoni, about Moab, about Mitzri, about Edom. So we're speaking about nations, ethnic nations. And so therefore, it makes sense to say that the Mamzer was, the pshat is a nation. And therefore, Zechariah is saying that even the Mamzer will come and live back to Eretz Yisrael. They will be allowed to live in Eretz Yisrael. But in Ashdod, they received the city of Ashdod, that they can settle there. Like all the other nations that return, like Mitzrayim will return, and Ashur will return. And so possibly after Sancheriv that have been mevalbeled, all the nations, there will be a return. Not only we will return, but also the other nations will return eventually. So it could be that this is the pshat, this is the pshat. And like I said, Chazal, since the Mamzer is also a punishment, knas, on an issue that happened before, like we see by Lusocha Kol Ego, like we see by Kilea Kerem, that the Chazal wanted to answer the issue of having anor. So they changed the words and they split up and they say Mamzer tikdash means tukat eish, that you have to burn it. Similarly, when a person has intercourse with a woman that is not allowed to, eventually the children have received a knas, and the knas are that become mamzer. And so, in other words, we associate the love of a mamzer, which is an ethnic group, to the love of somebody that came out from, it's a fruit from marriage which was not allowed to. And so how do they do it? By changing the words, by adding a vov, mum, zar, by splitting it up. Similar to gekasherd, similar to lois going to do with lesasun agudis. So kind of it's an adding on, and it becomes a deorayta. And that is why, because it's only originally a derabonnon that becomes a deorayta, chazal can also later on be matir. Because that was, I don't know if I asked that question, maybe I should have in the beginning of the video, but Mamzer seems to have a dinim of the derabannans. Very interesting. First of all, there is, it says in the Yerushalmi and in Bavli that the Mamzer, that there will be tohor, will be gekasherd, they will kasher Mamzer. How can they kasher Mamzer? Can they be entire Mamzer? Machlok is tanoim. It's both brought down in the Yerushalmi and Bavli. How can it be? Mamzer is one of the taryag mitzvahs, and the taryag mitzvahs are mitzvahs, so they cannot be matzah something which is an os isur mamash. So how can they be metayr of mamzer? And how can and also there's a special din that the mamzer velo safek mamzer. And there's they all talk about it. Why does according to the Rambam do they need a posuk every isur the safek is mutter? Why do I need this posuk to tell me mamzer velo safek mamzer? Why don't we say it on chazir, on velo? Neveilah, velo safek neveilah, chazir, velo safek chazir. Why don't we say that? Why is it dafke by Mamzer? This whole shmooze around that, and I leave it to yeshiva to deal with that, to go into that. But it's clear that there is something weird going on here. The Mamzer has this particular cooler that all the other Isurim don't seem to be having. Elomai, if we're assuming that the Mamzer is only the derabonnon that have been upgraded to a deorayta, then we can understand that. Then we can indeed understand that it can disappear, because you don't take away the love from the taryag. There is still the love of Mamzer b'kal Hashem, the pshat Mamzer, the nation, and therefore, even if you remove this other love later on, you will still have the love from the taryag. You're not removing the 365 love that remain. Similarly, if they would remove and took out age, then you would still have you would still have it as a posuk. Posuk, you don't have to remove it. You would have a problem with the taryag, but this is already a question of the Rambam. But in any case, so this is a discussion that I would like to put forward on the table. So, in short, you have cases where possibly it is a derabonnon and that has received the din deorayta by changing of the words. There's another case that I always mention many years ago when I spoke about that. Is also bosor basod treif. Chazal, normally bosor basod treif is one sentence. Chazal put a comma there. Bosor basod, meaning if something that came out of his mechitza, somebody that takes out kochim, korban pesach. It says in korban pesach you're not allowed to take out of the house or of the minuyim. But what happens if you take out? And Torah doesn't say anything. Then no, pshat is that we're not Torah, you just bring it back in. So Chazal wanted to punish those who took it out, and they said, no, the moment you take out, and it becomes also to eat it anymore. How do we have that? Where do we see that? Again, this is a knas, derabonnon, that becomes a deorayta. We learn it from bosor basode. So what they do is, instead of saying bosor basode treifo, the treifo that is in the sode is loisochelu, they say bosor basode, they put a comma. They change the wordings, and they put a comma, and so therefore there is either bosor basode, a bosor that went out of his mechitza, or comma, or a treifo loisochelu. So it is two objects. Things that go out from their mechitzas are not allowed to be eaten, and therefore there are other isurim that other things that can happen that will also inherit the love of loisel chelu because of that little comma that was added in the posuk. So you see that Chazal can add and change things but they have to change something. They cannot add on things which are in the posuk itself without changing, because then if they would make it a derayta, then indeed it would become a lav shebechnolis problem, or it is simply an interpretation. It's only Torah Shabbat Peh, it's only from the Yud Gimel Shabbat Nidreshes, and there is only one of them which is true, and the rest is only from the Yud Gimel Shabbat Nidreshes. So there are other ways to interpretation, but if you want, the moment that you change the words of the Torah, kind of you say you have to read it kri al tikre, as we say, al tikre b'noich al boinoich. So they also al tikre tikdash, but tikre tukadesh, al tikre mamzer, but tikre mumzar, and then it becomes kind of sometimes it because in order for it to become a derayta, because it's not like two pshatim in one word, but it's as if you are splitting up the posuk in two parallel psukim. So you have Mamzer, Loyovo Mamzer Bekal Hashem, and next to it you also have Loyovo Mumzar Bekal Hashem. And so therefore it's not like it's not a pirush on the first posuk, it becomes kind of a second posuk that lives in harmony together with the first posuk. And so you have kind of, becomes a Torah Shebichsa. What was a Torah Shebichsa becomes kind of a Torah Shebichsa. May we take a zoiche to the gule shleimo b'meiro b'yomeinu.